She pointed her phone at me like a weapon and shouted, "Leave now or I will call the police." Her husband stood behind her, grinning barefoot, wearing my old Navy t-shirt. I had paid for this home, every brick, every tile, every bill. 30 years of overtime now thrown out with one word: leave. I smiled, turned around, went and dialed the realtor's number. If they want to lose their house so badly, then I will help them. You won't believe what I did. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The porch light was on in the afternoon, throwing a small glare across the deadbolt. The swamp cooler hummed in the side yard, a tired breath that seemed to vibrate in my ribs. I kept the manila folder balanced on the rail, pressed my thumb against the top edge to feel the weight of the papers inside. Nora stood square in the doorway. Dylan watched through the slit of the curtain, a moon of his eye visible, the glow of a new television flickering behind him. Dust lifted, settled, lifted again along the concrete steps as the wind came and went. I did not lift my voice. I did not explain. I gave the address and the cross street to Colin, then said I needed a rush lien search and a comparative analysis before sunset. There was a pause on the line, the kind a good broker makes when he is already opening the right tabs. Then his voice came back steady. "I can start within the hour," he said. "I will need written permission in my email. You will have it in 10 minutes, I said. Run the liens hard. If there is anything recorded against the property, I want the dates and dollar amounts. Send the early comps as a draft. We can refine tomorrow." Nora's thumb hovered over the emergency screen. She kept her eyes on me. "Get off my porch," she said. I heard the brittle edge in her words, the kind that cuts the person holding it. Dylan shifted in the shadow behind her. He was a silhouette in my shirt. No socks, shoulders up, chin forward. A grin that did not reach his eyes. I lifted the folder. I set it against my chest with one hand. The paper made a soft sound that reminded me of the first time I learned to keep records. Not now, I told myself. Not here. No history, no pleading, no lessons. Only the next step. "Colin, I said I am also authorizing you to pull a title record. If you need my signature, send the form and I will sign and return it from my truck. Start the market analysis with the nearest 5 sales in the last 3 months. Exclude distressed sales. We are aiming for accuracy, not stories." "Copy," he said. "I will mark it urgent." "Thank you," I said. Then I ended the call and slipped the phone into my pocket. Nora held her ground. "You think this is your address to manage," she said. "It is not. You are not needed here. Leave." I looked at the number on the door, even though I knew it by heart. I let the sunlight sit on the brass as if it had its own opinion. My answer came out even. "You have made that clear." I am leaving. Dylan peeled back the curtain another inch. His mouth moved. No sound came out. The swamp cooler let out a long shiver. Somewhere down the street, a delivery truck thumped over a seam in the asphalt. I lowered the folder so the flap faced the sky. A small ridge of dust lifted and rolled off the cardboard like smoke that did not know where to go. Nora said, "I am counting to 3. "That will not be necessary," I said. Then I stepped backward off the top riser, felt the give of sand under the sole of my shoe. At the edge, found the next step and the next. The door moved half an inch forward in its frame. She was ready to slam it, ready to seal herself, and that grin in a box that would feel like victory for an hour and something else the day after. At the bottom of the steps, I stopped and balanced the folder in one hand to check my watch. The second hand slid past the 12 and kept going. I felt the heat in the band against my skin. "All right," I said to no one and lifted my keys. A voice tried to reach me from the doorway. "Wait," Nora said, and there was a small tremor in it. Not quite fear, not quite love. I did not turn. I had already promised myself the next thing would be a system, not a scene. The door closed with a flat clap. The sound of the deadbolt came half a beat later. The wind moved across the gravel and pushed a small curl of brown leaves toward the curb. I walked to the truck. The paint on the hood carried a dull layer of desert, the kind you notice only when you are about to wipe it away and decide not to. I placed the folder on the passenger seat. The hiss of the air vents met the silence in the cab. The ignition caught a quick, clean start. The dashboard clock changed by a minute, as if it had waited for me. Email, I told myself. I opened the draft on my phone and typed with my thumb, slow and clean, no wasted words. Colin authorization attached as a photo and a PDF. Full name, address, last four of my social, permission to pull title and record search. Please mark confidential. Send preliminary comps as soon as you have them. I added a sentence at the end. If any draws or encumbrances are found, send me the record numbers and the dates in bold. I pressed send and watched the wheel spin once. Then I opened my camera and took a clear photo of the signature page inside the folder front and back, the one with all the small writing that people skip. My phone buzzed, a number I knew. I let it ring exactly twice, then answered. Colin said he had the address and was beginning the search. He asked if I wanted him to cue a photographer if we moved forward. Not yet, I said. Do the numbers first. We will set everything else by the numbers. Understood, he said. I ended the call and rested both hands on the top of the steering wheel. Across the street, a boy in a red shirt rode a scooter in lazy circles, the back wheel clicking over the same crack every pass. The sky had that pale afternoon color it gets before a hard sunset. I waited for the feeling that usually comes after a family door closes in your face. The weight in the chest. The ache you want to explain away. Nothing came. There was only a narrow line of cool air from the vent against my wrist and the steady thrum of the cooler on the side of the house. I put the truck in drive. The tires rolled over the gravel and found the clean surface of the road. The rear view showed the porch one last time, the brass numbers catching the sun, the curtain tilting and falling back. I did not look again. The first stop was 5 minutes away if the light at the corner held green. A copier store. I parked under the one strip of shade cast by a thin pole and walked inside with the folder under my arm. The woman behind the counter nodded and pointed at the self-serve. I scanned every page into a fresh email thread for Colin. The glass was warm from the machine light. The lid made a soft thump every time it closed. When I was done, I slid the papers back into the folder, tapped the bottom edge straight against the counter and thanked her. Outside, the air had shifted. A faint smell of rain that would not arrive. My phone chimed with Colin's reply. Receiving, he wrote. 2 prior draws were recorded on the home equity line. A third application was under review. I will confirm amounts. Early comps attached as a first pass. He added 3 addresses with photos and sale prices. I looked once quickly. The numbers told a story in a language that did not care about anyone's tone of voice. I sent him one more note. Good. Keep the engine running. If you need anything signed in person, I will come to you. On the walk back to the truck, my shoulder brushed a display of pool noodles, and they wobbled in a slow, colorful wave. I steadied them with a hand and kept moving. Traffic hissed along the boulevard. A bus stopped at the stop and took on 3 people. I slid behind the wheel and took a long breath as if measuring the cab for any leftover anger. There was none. I set the folder flat again, palm on the cardboard, and felt the shape of the metal clip under the flap. My phone lit up with Nora's name. I let it ring to the end. A message came in a few sentences, crushed together words I had heard before in other rooms with other kinds of carpets. I did not press play. Not yet. The dashboard clock moved forward 1 minute. A small shadow passed across the windshield, a cloud the size of a hand. The light softened, then returned. I turned the truck toward the main road. The desert leaned back on both sides, quiet and equal. A dust devil lifted across a vacant lot and unwound itself without touching anything. I thought about what dignity looks like when no one is watching. It looks like a calm voice with a list. It looks like a folder held level. It looks like a step away from a door you have paid for and a call to a person who speaks the language of record numbers and dates. I let the idea settle. Then I pressed my thumb against the wheel and drove. At the next light, I glanced into the mirror and saw a small flash behind me, the kind of glint a sun will throw off the face of a deadbolt when a door is finally locked. I did not feel shut out. I felt something else. The quiet click inside means you have chosen what will hold. A system, not a scene. A path, not a plea. The signal changed. I eased forward into the green and did not look back. Numbers taught me patience long before people did. I learned it on steel grating and concrete floors with a clipboard balanced on my forearm while motors thumped and belts hissed. In the Army, I traced wires with a meter, and a steady hand learned that current always chooses the path it is allowed, not the path you argue for. After discharge, I kept the same habits at the plant. Every shift I logged amperage, vibration, and bearing temperatures. 40 years of lines and numbers, clean blocks of handwriting that never raised a voice. When a unit squealed in the winter, you did not beg it to stop. You bled the air from the lines and tightened the fitting. When I wanted a thing to change, I picked up a pen. People think money is opinion. It is not. It is a ledger and a clock. On the first of each month, the principal goes down, the interest recalculates, and the balance either surrenders a little ground or refuses. When I bought my own place, I kept an amortization table in pencil. Every time I could swing an extra 50, I erased the old square and wrote a new one. The bank never knew my reasons, it only recognized the figure. I watched the graph bend toward me the way a patient plant turns its face to the sun. The overtime years felt like a long hallway, slips in my lunchbox, grease across my knuckles even after the second wash. 3 summers of taking the second shift so the day crew could see their kids play ball. I kept the table on the kitchen table, and the coffee thermos left a faint ring on a page that still exists. I never scrubbed it off. That circle reminded me that a home is not just drywall and stucco. It is decisions repeated until they harden. When Nora called in 2021 with her voice bright and a little fast, I could hear the dreams inside it. Starter place near work, a small yard, sunlight in the afternoon. She said the loan officer, a woman named Monique Patel, believed they could qualify with help. Dylan had contractor income that went up and down. Nora was steady but not strong enough on her own. They would need a co-applicant with proven credit and time in the saddle. Monique set the appointment. I showed up in a clean shirt and boots that had seen better days. Monique had the calm that a good lender has. She did not sell a fantasy. She described ratios reserves, appraisal escrow for taxes and insurance. She explained exactly what a co-applicant means in terms that do not blush. Equal responsibility and equal standing. Either borrower may act to protect collateral if misuse is suspected. She tapped the clause with the flat of her pen and let it sit there like a posted sign. I read the paragraph twice. I took a copy home and read it once more with my glasses on the end of my nose. I signed because I believed I was helping my daughter cross the creek on a steady rock. Not a free ride, a footing. The rate was not a miracle, but it was honest. Payments manageable. Taxes are not terrible. I folded the papers and filed them in the drawer with my name on it. For the next year, I watched from a distance as parents watch when a child has a new life to look at. Birthdays, a cookout, a porch light left on when I came by after a late shift to drop off a box of extra tile I had in the garage. Nothing heavy, no speeches about frugal living. Just a quiet sense that the table was bending for her now, too. Work never stopped teaching. There was the year when my own place nearly ate the vacation fund. I wrote a check to the plumber and then one to the principal for $10 just to tell the balance I still remembered who was boss. We did not take the trip. We ate peaches on cheap paper plates in the backyard, and I did not feel robbed. I felt faithful. Sometime after I retired, the habit remained. Coffee at dawn, a look at the bills, a note in the margin of something mundane like filters for the swamp cooler or a replacement gasket for the outside spigot. I kept those notes even when no one else would ever read them. They told me I still lived by a rule I trusted. Do the small thing now, so the large thing never becomes a fire. The first present-day jolt arrived quietly on a weekday afternoon that felt like any other. I was in my small office setting up a new lamp and sharpening a pencil to fill an empty line on a list, when the printer waking up beside me made its low gear sound. I had not sent a job. The machine spooled a page anyway and pushed it out with a damp corner. A late payment notice addressed to Nora's residence had been redirected through my email account, then to my printer, a relic of an online profile we had all shared once when I helped them set up autopay. The letter mentioned a home equity line and a draw I had never heard about. The amount sat on the right margin like a pebble in a shoe. It was not ruined, not yet, but it was not small. I held the page by the edges. The paper smelled like warm plastic and toner. I read it twice and felt a familiar click in my head. Not panic, not an accusation. The switch that moves me from worry to work. I placed the notice beside my pay stub folder and reached for the file that holds the application package from the year before. Monique's clause waited there in clear ink. Either borrower may act to protect collateral. Numbers had given me this patience. The paper had given me the lane. I did not call Nora. I did not want a scene. I wanted facts. I opened the laptop and signed into the lender portal. It still recognized my credentials. 2 draws against the equity line populated a simple table. Dates, totals. The balance adjusted itself on the next line. There is a particular quiet that settles in a room when information confirms what your bones already knew. The air seemed to lean in and listen. I printed the screen and marked the lines with a pencil. On the edge of the page, my coffee left a second faint ring next to the old one from years back, like an echo finding its way through a canyon. A person might call that sentimental. I do not. I call it record-keeping with a little history attached. The next present-day beat came later that afternoon when my phone buzzed once and a small banner marched across the top. A lender system notification addressed to Nora but routed to the address on file. Pending increase request, it read with a request number and a date 2 days out. I did not breathe for a moment, not because I was surprised, but because the last piece of a pattern had snapped into place. You do not argue with a pattern. You act. I sent myself an email with the subject line working file and attached the scans I had made of the application, the page with Monique's clause, the lender screen, and my pencil notations. I added a brief line in the body. Primary facts gathered. No conclusions written. Keep the language clean. Then I closed the lid and let the room get quiet again. I went for a slow walk around the block to keep my hands steady. The neighborhood smelled like cut grass and warm dust. A woman rolled her trash bin to the curb and waved. I waved back and thought about numbers again. They correct without scolding. They deliver news without tone. When you are young, that feels cold. With time, it feels like mercy. It means you can act without arguing with anyone. You can say, here is the figure, here is what follows. Here is the tool that shifts it in the right direction. Back at the desk, I wrote a line at the top of a clean sheet. Equity deserves defense. Under it, I listed 3 actions. Confirm title history, verify all recorded encumbrances, prepare options if misuse is established. I did not write names. I did not write feelings. I wrote tasks that could be completed and measured. As evening settled, the printer sang once more a small page feed from some backlog in the internet that still thinks I am everyone's administrator. It spit out a promotional flyer from the lender about renovations and easy draws. I almost laughed. I slid it under the other sheets as a reminder of how things get sold in this country. People are told that equity is a candy jar on the counter rather than a beam holding up a roof. I put my hand on the folder and felt the coarse cardboard against my skin. Somewhere in the stack was the circle from my old thermos and the pencil path of a younger man trying to bend a table. It was still bending. Work had made it move, and work was going to keep it from moving the wrong way. I did not call anyone that night. I sharpened the pencil again and dated the page. The small shavings curled on the desk like wood from a careful cut. In the corner, the lamp gave a patient light. My phone stayed face down. When it finally buzzed again, I let it. The sound carried through the house like a gentle hammer, reminding me that there is a difference between noise and signal. The signal was already on paper. The rest could wait. The lights buzzed like a warning I did not need. I stood in the co-working break room with a stack of printouts under my palm and the hum of a vending machine filling the corners. The laminate table was scarred with coffee rings and a knife mark that ran like a fault line through fake wood grain. Dylan pushed the door with his hip and froze when he saw me. His eyes went first to my hands and then to the papers. A smile tried to start on his face and then failed to finish. He said he had 5 minutes. I said 2 would do. I slid the top page forward so only the headers showed. He recognized the names before he recognized the numbers. Sportsbook payout, margin interest, pay in 4 for electronics. His throat moved. He reached for a cup and missed the stack of clean ones by an inch. A plastic rim clicked on the counter and spun in a slow circle until it lay still. I asked the first question. Do you recognize these companies? He said he dabbled. He called it a pattern that paid when he stayed disciplined. He said people who worked with their hands never understood compounding. I let that float in the fluorescent light and then set the next sheet on the table. The bank's portal header showed an application number and a word I did not like. Pending. I asked the second question. Are you asking the lender to increase the line against the residents this week? He glanced at the clock on the microwave and said, timing is everything. He said a draw on Friday lines up with a play on Saturday and a resale the week after. He said it like we were partners in a warehouse move and all that was missing was a dolly. I kept my voice level. The vending machine breathed. A can thumped somewhere inside its ribs. I turned the third page and let the numbers do the talking I did not want to do. Interest on revolving balances piled quietly. A new buy now pay later plan for a television model I had seen glowing in my daughter's living room, a delivery date with a signature. He looked at the page the way a man looks at a tire track in soft dirt that matches his own tread. I asked the third question. Where does the cash go when the timing does not line up? He said it always lines up. He said variance is noise. He called it a scheme at first, and then corrected himself to strategy. He said the draw is covered by a resale cycle. He said the line is there to be used. He said the equity was sleeping, and he knew how to wake it without breaking anything. I let the quiet settle. The break room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and hand soap. I kept my thumb on the corner of the page so it did not slide. Dylan lifted his chin. He told me not to worry about grown men making grown decisions. He said the lender never flags anything unless someone complains. His phone vibrated on the counter with a sharp, insect-like sound. He tapped it and turned the screen toward himself, not away from me. A mail preview flashed. Increase request received. He palmed the phone as if I had not seen it and tucked it under the edge of a paper napkin if that could make it less real. I did not raise a point. I lifted my own phone and set it face down. The vending machine cycled and stopped and the room seemed to exhale. I said I wanted to be sure I understood. You are confirming there is a pending second draw against the line that sits on the property. He said confirmation is a strong word. He said everybody leverages. He said he had a play mapped to the minute. He described a price window on a coin and a quick hop into margin and then a blended exit before rollover fees. He talked fast and used his hands like he was shaping a box. I did not look at his hands. I looked at the reflection of his phone in the stainless steel face of the microwave door. The preview banner was still visible in reverse. It repeated the words I had read. I shifted my weight as if my knee ached, and the slight move gave me the angle I wanted. I lifted my phone and adjusted the screen to check a non-existent text and tapped the camera with the side of my thumb. The shutter sound was off. The photo caught the reflection well enough to show the sender and the subject line when enlarged. Dylan leaned in and tapped the stack with a knuckle. He asked where I had gotten the printouts. I said the bank sometimes sends letters to the wrong place when people stop reading what they signed. He told me to stay in my lane. He said I had no standing. He said the residence was not my business. I kept my eyes on his face and not his words. I said the paperwork says otherwise. He told me paperwork is for people who never learn to move fast. I asked a quieter question. When did the first draw post? He said last month. He said he shifted it out of sight with a refinance plan I would not understand. His mouth moved on understanding like it was a flavor he wanted me to taste. He mentioned the model number of the television without realizing he had. He mentioned a delivery window that matched a date I had underlined at home with a pencil. He did not know where my underlines lived. He did not ask. He reached for the papers like a man swats a fly. I gathered them before his fingers touched the edges. He smiled again, and his eyes did not. He told me to recycle those and stop making drama in office spaces people share. He said I should go home and garden. He said older men like me forget how modern money works. He moved to the coffee machine and pressed a button that produced nothing. He pressed it again harder. The machine whirred and then gave up. He said, "See, even this place is broken." I looked at the vending machine and watched the little red numbers that show price flicker for a second and then hold firm. I said machines hold firm when they are programmed by someone who knows what they are doing. He asked if Nora knew I was here. I said I was not here to make a scene. He said he would tell her I came to harass him at work. He said I waved papers and shouted in a shared space. I told him he was free to describe me however he liked. He asked if that was a threat. I told him it was a permission. We stood in the buzz and let the air flatten between us. I could hear keystrokes from a room beyond the hall and the soft roll of a chair across carpet. Dylan checked his phone again and then set it face down as if the subject line could not leak through the plastic when it was not looking at the ceiling. He asked why I cared so much about figures when families were about feelings. I said work builds equity, and equity deserves defense. He said that sounded like something on a poster in a bank office no one visits. I did not argue. I have spent a life letting numbers carry the weight I do not want to drag through a room. I said I would be in touch with the lender as needed. He told me to stay out of it. His voice tilted when he said it, and I heard fear come in under the word, like water under a door. He asked how much I was willing to lose to make a point. I said I did not come to lose. I said I came to understand. He stepped closer. His breath carried a sweet note that did not come from coffee. He said accidents happen when old men put their noses where they do not belong. I took the step he had left me and gave him a nod that did not mean agreement. I said, I hope you have a safe week. I said, safety is underrated. His laugh was a sound without warmth. He followed it with a sentence about people who confuse paper with power. I said, paper is just proof, and proof is the only thing that stands when opinions sit down. The vending machine rattled once, then stopped. The lights buzzed and then steadied. For a moment the room went quiet in a way I could feel in my teeth. He said he had a meeting. He said we were done. He picked up his phone and angled it away as he walked out. I watched the door close without a soft catch. The frame shuddered and then stilled. I stood with my pages and my photograph and my steady hands. I did not look through the documents again. I slid them back into the folder and lined the corners with the table edge until they were square. I walked to the sink and rinsed 2 rings off the laminate with the flat of my palm and a paper towel, a small habit from years in rooms where cleanliness keeps you alive. I threw the towel away and held the lid of the trash can a second longer than necessary so it would not slam. Outside the break room, the hallway was cooler. I could hear someone on a headset say the words "send it over" and then say "thank you." I moved past glass doors with posters about collaboration and growth. I felt none of those things. I felt something else I trusted more: clarity. At the elevator, I tapped my pocket to be sure the photo was where I put it. I knew it was. My thumb could feel the ridge of the case over the lens. The elevator opened and no one was inside. I stepped in and watched the floor numbers count down with the patience of a person who has seen many numbers count down and has never asked them to hurry. On the sidewalk, the sun had climbed a fraction. Heat rose off the concrete in a wavering sheet. Cars slid by with their windows up. A delivery driver pushed a dolly stacked with boxes across a seam in the pavement. Each wheel dropped and thumped and then climbed again. I breathed once through my nose and once through my mouth and reached for the truck door. The handle was hot. I held it anyway. When the engine started, the radio tried to talk. I turned it off. In the silence, I replayed 3 answers Dylan had not meant to give. Pending increase. Delivery confirmed. Friday window. They fit together like cut pieces meant to go that way. Truth leaks from people trying to look composed. All you have to do is stand still long enough to see the drip and set a clean cup under it. I set my hands at 10 and 2 and felt the wheels settle. The vending machine in my head cycled one last time and then the noise dropped out. Only quiet remained, and the next step waited where it always waits, in plain sight, with the lights bright enough to see. The coffee scoop hit the counter like a tiny gavel. A dull tap, not loud, but it settled the room as if something had just been decided. Nora stood by the grinder with her hair pulled back and a sweater hanging from one elbow. The refrigerator door was a gallery of smiling faces, held up by magnets shaped like small suns. A wedding pose in the corner caught the afternoon light aslant across 2 people who believed in everything that day promised. The television in the next room threw a steady shine into the kitchen doorway, a glare that looked more expensive than it needed to. The coffee maker began its slow drip. The first drops landed in the carafe and made a sound like a clock you only hear when you are waiting for news. I set the folder on the island, manila against stone. I put my palm on it to keep it from sliding. The air smelled like flavored candles and stress, a sweetness trying to drag a heavier thing behind it. Nora said she had 5 minutes before she had to return a call. Her words had the careful tone people use when they are protecting something they do not want examined. I told her I would not take 6. She nodded and looked at the coffee maker as if it could answer for her. I opened the folder and chose what needed to be said without turning this into a list. One statement showing the equity line with a new movement. 1 page with the monthly spend from a betting app. I did not spread everything. I did not repeat numbers that already lived in my notes. I slid the 2 pages across until they paused at the lip of the island on her side. The phone on the counter buzzed face down. A small ring pulsed under the glass like a heartbeat and then stopped. I kept my voice even. The equity line shows additional activity. The subscription fees on this betting service repeat each month. The balance will lean toward interest if nothing changes. I said it like I was reading a gauge, not assigning blame. I tapped the upper right corner where the dates lived. She glanced and then looked away. She reached for the scoop again, even though the grounds were already measured. The scoop barely kissed the counter this time, as if she was trying to undo the first sound. Her mouth tightened. She said, "This feels like an attack." I told her it was not an attack. It was an instrument reading. Pressure rising, temperature climbing. Those are not insults, they are conditions you address so nothing fails. She took a breath that did not fill her. She said Dylan has it handled. She said he knows money. She said not everyone manages life with a pencil and a table. Her voice thinned when she said pencil and table, as if the words tasted like dust. I let the comment pass. The coffee maker exhaled and went quiet. Steam ran a finger up the glass and left it fogged at the top. The phone buzzed again and rolled a fraction of an inch from the vibration. I drew the second page back a finger width. Delivery confirmation for a soundbar showed a total that I did not say aloud. I pointed only at the date, which matched the charge on the betting page beside it. The line of them meant a week where fun was funded by leverage. I did not use that sentence. I held to the facts in front of us the way a person holds to a guardrail in the wind. She looked at the fridge for help. The wedding photo had a small crease in one corner. A candle flickered near the sink and sent up a thin stream of perfume. She said you never liked him. It came out soft and sharp at the same time. I kept my eyes on the paper. This is not about liking or disliking. This is about the address printed at the top of the page and the way numbers behave when they are tired of pretending. She reached for the betting statement and pulled it closer as if distance had made it less true. The paper bent under her fingers. Her phone pulsed again. She did not answer. She said, "Stop calling it my address like it belongs to you." The word you carried weighed, it did not need to be carried. I kept my tone plain. The documents list me as co-applicant. That gives me responsibilities I will not ignore. It also gives me protections I did not ask for but will use if I must. I said protections as if naming a tool in a kit, not a threat in a parking lot. A small wave moved across her face like someone turned down a dimmer and then turned it back up too fast. She said, "Are you trying to embarrass me?" I said no. I am trying to keep this roof safe from choices that do not know what roofs cost. The phone finally demanded to be heard. The vibration grew into a flutter and then fell still. The ring left a faint circle on the countertop that mirrored the ring I carry on a ledger at home. I watched her glance at it and then look away as if noticing the mark would make it permanent. The television in the next room switched scenes and sent a flash against the wall. The sound bled into the kitchen, a voice declaring a win easy enough for anyone to have. I reached out and straightened the corner of the statement that had curled under her palm. She pulled her hand back as if the paper might catch. She said, "If you keep pushing, I will get help that arrives in a uniform." She did not say the number. She did not need to. I nodded. I did not take a step. I said, "You have every right to ask for help if you feel unsafe. I am not unsafe. I am a set of pages and a name at the bottom that means I am part of this whether you want me here or not." The phrase "part of this" made her shoulders rise. She said, "You are not part of my marriage." I said, "I do not want to be. I want the property that secures this borrowing to stop being treated like a wallet with no bottom." The dog 2 houses over barked twice short and annoyed the sound of a creature who thinks someone has stepped where they should not. Sun slid lower and found the edge of the island. It drew a bright line across the stone and then stretched it toward the floor. I took a napkin from the holder and set it to the side. When you are picked up by a system, you stop needing to shout. That is what I told myself when I felt my throat try to tighten. She reached for the carafe and poured. The coffee sloshed once and kissed the rim. A bead found the paper by the corner and left a small mark that looked like a period with no sentence. I moved the page and flipped the napkin open in a practiced square, dried the spot with the care of someone who has spent years keeping records clean. I did not dramatize the gesture. I made it neat because neatness is how I steady myself. She watched the motion as if it insulted her. She said, "You are always correcting." I said, "I am always preventing." Those are different jobs. I slid both pages back into the folder, kept the stack flush, and closed the flap with a thumb I did not let shake. I left the napkin folded and dry on the counter where she could throw it away without seeing me do it. She set her cup down without tasting it. The ceramic clicked on the counter. Her voice dropped to a narrow line. "Do not come here to tell me how to live. I said I came here to say a single sentence. The line is moving in the wrong direction. It must stop. After that, the system we both signed for will say the next thing, not me." Monique's claws lived between us without a breath set in its direction. A boundary does not need a speech. She tried one more angle, a softer one that remembered playgrounds and school nights. She said, "I am your daughter." I said, "Yes. Love is why I learned how to build things that do not sag when storms pass over. Love without listening is custody without care." I said it under my breath as much to myself as to her, a truth I have had to teach my own bones more than once. She blinked and then lifted her phone. Her thumb hovered. She asked if I was leaving. I said I am. The door latch clicked behind me when I reached the threshold. Not slammed, just the hard little sound of a decision finishing itself. A child down the street laughed and then cried in the same breath. The neighborhood dog had one last opinion and then went quiet. On the porch, the heat pressed one hand to my back and then lifted it. I carried the folder against my ribs, and the corner dug into my shirt through the fabric like a square reminder to keep the edges sharp. On the walk to the truck, the sun lay a long stripe of light across the driveway. It stretched from the front step to the edge of the curb, a straight piece of day that looked like it wanted to be measured. I opened the door and set the folder on the seat. My phone buzzed once more and showed a number I recognized, and I did not answer. I sat with both hands on my thighs until the air inside cooled enough to breathe easily. Then I started the engine. The radio tried to sell me a victory I did not ask for. I let the volume go down until it became a whisper, and then a hum, and then nothing. The mirror gave me the picture of the corner of the house as I eased back. The deadbolt flashed in the sun as if it had a thought and then lost it. I felt nothing like victory. I felt exactly like a person who had delivered a single clear sentence in a room that preferred noise. The street took me at a slow roll. The day leaned toward evening. There was work to do, and not a shout left in me to waste. I labeled my drawers so panic would never have to. The labels were thin strips of tape with neat block letters, the kind of handwriting you learn when a crooked mark can cost you a day's work. In my small office, the LED task lamp threw a clean pool of light across the desk, leaving the corners in a calm dim that helped me breathe. Outside, dry light from the desert bent through the blinds and lay pale ladders on the wall. The top drawer slid open with a soft wooden sigh. Tabs and colors I did not pick for beauty waited in a grid. Insurance, taxes, utilities, loans. The folder with my name on it had a weight that felt familiar in my hand. I lifted it, tapped the bottom edge square on the desk, then spread it so the spine lay flat. Paper has a sound when it relaxes. It is small, like fabric, remembering it used to be something else. I set a magnifying glass to the side and the lamp caught its rim so it flashed once and then quieted. The application package sat in the middle, clipped at the top with a metal jaw that had outlived 2 computers. I moved past the cover letter and the pages everyone pretends to read. The sentence I needed lived deeper in the stack. I turned each sheet with my thumb at the upper corner so no edge would tear. There it was, not the first clause I had underlined months ago, not the part about being equally responsible. A different spine worded by a careful hand. In the event of risk to the collateral, any signer may initiate measures to preserve and protect the asset, including filings that prevent transfer or encumbrance. The sentence did not shout. It simply stood there, printed in the same ink as everything else, asking to be remembered. Beside it, in Monique's tidy pen from that day at the branch, a small note curved between lines. "Call me if you ever need a translation." She had put a smile next to it so the legalese would not feel like a wall. I traced the note with my eyes and then leaned back. The lamp showed each fiber in the paper. The room felt like it had taken one long breath and held it for me. I made a short list on a yellow pad. Confirm title history. Identify all recorded liens. Prepare notices that freeze the frame if necessary. No politics in that list. No blame. Only actions a clerk could stamp without knowing my story. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a number I had looked at once and saved for later. Ava Delgado. I had found her through a quiet referral from a former coworker who swore by her calm in ugly situations. I pressed the call and listened to 2 rings and a human voice that sounded like someone who leaves dishes clean in a shared sink. Ava. I said, "My name is Walter Kane. I need a brief consult regarding a property where I am a signer. I can summarize and email documents if you prefer." "You can summarize now," she said. "Then send the documents while we schedule a proper meeting. Keep it plain and I will keep it efficient." Her voice left no room for performance. I gave her the address, my position as co-applicant, and the sentence in the packet that mattered. I did not tell her about kitchens or televisions or doorways or phones face down on a counter. I gave her dates and words on paper. She said the sentence I had found allows protective filings to be made by any party on the note when there is evidence of risk. She said the first step is a full title pull to see exactly what sits against the property today. She said the next step, if needed, is a notice that stops further movement until a judge decides the lane we are in. She said she would want a clean copy of the application, the deed of trust, and any statements I could lawfully access showing recent activity. I can have those to you within the hour, I said. Good, she said. I will open a file. We can meet tomorrow morning. I prefer to run these cases like a checklist. You will not hear me say wait and see. You will hear me say file and serve. Her calm did something to the air in my office. It cleared it. Thank you, I said. One more thing, she said. Keep your language simple in emails. We want the documents to do the heavy lift. Understood, I said. We ended the call, and the room settled back into quiet. I reached for the printer with my left hand and hit the power. It woke with a low whir that sounded like a small engine agreeing to work. I scanned the application pack at the deed page with Nora's and my names, the sentence about protective steps, and the recent statements that showed what needed no adjectives. Each page slid under the lid and came back to my hand warm at the edge. I attached everything to an email with the subject line, Documents for Review. The body of the message was 4 lines. I listed what was attached. I identified the sentence I had found without paraphrasing. I asked for confirmation of receipt. I said I would be available by phone if she needed anything else before morning. Then I sent it and sat on my hands for 15 seconds to keep from adding a paragraph that would only tell a stranger about private air. The lamp clicked off. The room changed from surgical to human. I stood and crossed to the window and opened the blinds with 2 fingers. Evening leaned in through the mesquite outside. The wind moved softly through the branches and clicked the dry pods together like a slow metronome. The sky had that low burn you only see when the day is almost done and the light forgets how to be white. On the desk, the magnifying glass caught the last thin stripe of sun and laid a bright oval on the sentence I had found. It looked like the word protect was lit from inside, which of course it was not, but I let myself have the small picture. Paper does not care about your heart. It cares about your signatures. It cares about time stamps. It cares about the ink it wears. I sat back down and wrote a second list on the pad. Things to bring to the meeting: photo ID, original folder, notes on dates, a clean copy of the checklist. I added a final line in smaller letters: no stories unless asked. My phone buzzed softly on the desk and turned its face toward the ceiling. A new message sat in the notification bar from an address I did not recognize. It was a system mail confirming an appointment slot at the courthouse for public records access, a link I had requested earlier that afternoon when I was checking how to search filings without standing in a line. I clicked the time, added it to my calendar, and closed the notification before it tried to show me anything more. I closed the folder, pressed the edges flat, and slid it back into its tab. The drawer took it in with the same quiet it gives everything. I turned off the printer and let the fan spin down. The lamp clicked on again for a second while I checked the email one more time for attachments. Then off. Then the room held its own dim like a chest that contains enough air for the night. In the kitchen, I rinsed a cup and left it to dry. The house made small noises that only the owner hears. A duct flexing somewhere, the smallest tap in a wall where heat settles. I did not have to rehearse a speech. I did not have to practice a face. The decision did not need my pulse to climb. It had the sentence and the lawyer and a time on the calendar. If feelings tried to argue, they would have to take it up with the page. Back at the desk, I wrote one last note so the morning would not start with a scramble. Copies for Ava, envelope for Colin, pen with a fresh cartridge. I tucked the magnifying glass into a drawer so I would not be tempted to lose myself in tiny letters when a phone call would do. The wind moved again through the mesquite and the evening clicked forward a small step. People think anger powers action. It does for a moment and then asks you to lie down. What lasts is a habit that does not need to be loud. I felt it in my shoulders the way you feel a pack sit right. Not heavy, balanced. I shut the office door with a light touch and stood for a second in the hallway. The air in the house was cooler than outside. My name on the drawer sat behind the door like a quiet signature on the day. The work was placed, not performed. The papers would travel in the morning. The next sounds would be printers and stamps and keys and locks that exist for reasons no one has to agree with. You do not win arguments with paper. You abide by it, or you learn why that was unwise. I went to the porch for a breath before bed. The street was soft with late light. A cicada started and stopped in the pepper tree. Somewhere a screen door closed, and a voice said goodnight to a dog. I let the last warm air of the day pass over my face, and I thought not for the first time that paper does not shout. It decides. Then I went inside and left the night to keep watch over the labels I had made so panic would never need to remember where anything lives. When paper moves, people have to. I felt it at 8 in the morning when the printer woke and the first page slid out warm. The header carried the courthouse seal and a date that belonged to today, not someday. I stacked the copies and pressed the edges even with my palm. The machine kept whirring steady as a metronome. Ava called at 8:15. "We submit now," she said. "Partition by sale and a notice that freezes any new moves." I asked how many signatures. "One from you on the verification," she said. I signed the pleadings. I told her I was ready. She sent the packet through. My screen chimed a soft ding and the forms appeared like a calm set of orders. I read each line the way I have read specifications my whole life, slow and plain. Then I signed with a hand that did not need to be convinced. She wrote, "I will lodge them in person. You will receive stamped copies before noon." I called Colin at 8:30. He answered on the first ring and talked in verbs. I run comps. I pull the map. I tag 3 quiet cash buyers and hold back the rest. I asked for his read on the neighborhood. He said steady demand, clean closings when price respects reality. He said a forced sale demands certainty more than pride. I said we will take certainty. The mail chimed again. Ava sent a photo from a marble hallway, the corner of a pillar in the frame by accident, a file cart behind her, and my case number in blue ink across the top page. "Recorded," she wrote. The clerk stamped both. My phone vibrated with a second message before I could answer. A scanned copy of the notice, the seal dark from fresh pressure. The letters rose from the paper almost enough to feel through the glass. A rubber mark is not a prayer, I thought. It is gravity. By mid-morning, my email wore a rhythm. Ding for Ava, reporting the case entered. Ding for Colin, attaching a spread of comparable sales with addresses, square footage, days on market contract price and closed price. He added a note in plain language. "These 3 show the lane we can use." He did not pitch. He placed. Ava called again from the courthouse steps. "Service windows are backed up," she said, "but the file is live and the notice is posted. I have already cued the appraiser." I asked how long until formal service. She said a deputy will knock within 5 business days, sooner if routes line up. She paused and added the line that turns air into action. If they do not answer, default becomes a path. I stood up without meaning to and walked from the desk to the kitchen and back. The floor under my feet felt like nothing in particular, which was exactly what I wanted. No drama, only process. I told her thank you. She said, "Do not thank me yet. Thank the record when it holds." Colin sent another message. Appraiser confirmed for Thursday afternoon. He wrote, "I will be at the property with a key from the lockbox only after notice is proper." He listed what the appraiser would check: roof condition, mechanical systems, interior surfaces, photos of every room, exterior angles for buyers who care about corners. He said I will keep it low friction and high clarity. Between those notes, I scanned my own files and found a handful of small things that told a consistent story. Not every detail mattered. A few did. Buy now, pay later. Pulls for shiny items that depreciate the second they are plugged in. A sequence of consumer draws stacked close like fence pickets, thin and tall. I wrote a short line for Ava. "We can categorize these as waste events if the court asks for color." She replied with one word. "Noted." Before lunch, I drove to the courthouse to meet her for 10 minutes. Marble floors turned footsteps into small echoes, and the ceiling gave back old air as if it had held other decisions and remembered how to behave. Ava handed me stamped copies. The upper corner carried the seal in wet blue. Her finger tapped the case number once. "This number rules the next 30 days, she said. I nodded and did not try to give the moment a speech. People moved past us with folders and phones and the kind of concentration that belongs to deadlines. We stepped aside to a bench so she could lay out the timeline. Day 0 is today, she said. Service will start the clock. They have a set number of days to answer. If they file something useful, we set hearings. If they do not, we ask the court to proceed without them. She looked up at me to be sure I understood. I said I am familiar with clocks. She almost smiled. Back home, the mailbox clanked when I pulled it open and I found a predated envelope from a vendor I did not expect. A finance company with a cheerful logo had sent a welcome to the installment plan letter. It named consumer goods I had not purchased and listed a 4-month schedule. I held the page like a specimen and brought it inside. I scanned it and sent it to Ava, who replied with a pair of instructions. Save the original. Do not confront. Let it enter the pile. At 2 o'clock, Colin called with his voice low as if he stood in a lobby. I spoke with 2 buyers, he said. They can move without mortgage contingencies. They care about the timeline more than the polish. He added that the price would reflect urgency, not top of the market, and then waited. I said predictable beats pretty. He said I will keep both warm and will not commit until you approve. The afternoon had a rhythm I have felt on days when a big unit needed to be taken offline and repaired. Many small movements in a reliable order. No one needed to be loud. The printer cooled. The phone rested. The email settled and then dinged only when it should. I made coffee and stood at the window while it ran. The light outside had thinned and taken on that high desert color that looks like the sky has forgotten fire for a minute and remembered bone. Ava sent a final message before the close of business. Service instructions confirmed. A deputy will carry the papers. We will get a return of service with the time and date. That document matters. Keep reachable for calls. I wrote back, I will. I asked what she needed from me tonight. She answered with 3 words, do not escalate anything. The process is impartial. That is its strength. I sat at the table with the stamped copies and the pad with my lists. I drew a small box next to each task and filled it in when I could. Submit square, record square, appraisal in motion, buyers warm, service pending. If Dylan or Nora called, I would let the phone ring and go quiet. I had promised myself that this story would move by record numbers, not by voices trying to bend it back to feelings. Near dusk, Colin sent a text that was more like a field note. Photographer on standby when we need it. Do not want to spook anyone with a sign too early. I agreed. He added an observation I did not ask for but appreciated. Cash people like certainty and clean paperwork. You are giving me both. The evening wind moved through the mesquite and gave the house a soft click like a clock someone had set to a kind tempo. I opened the stamped copy again and touched the raised ink with one fingertip, not for magic, but to remind myself that this is how systems talk, not in shouts, in marks that stay. My phone lit up once more. Ava again. Brief voicemail. Her voice was the same steady line. One more note for you, she said. If they do not reply after service, we ask the court to accept their silence as consent to proceed. People mistake silence for safety. The law sometimes calls it something else. I put the phone down and looked at nothing for a while. The day had been a montage of verbs. Submit, record, confirm, cue. None of those words would scare anyone in a movie. They would not win a stage. They work anyway. When paper moves, people have to. After dark, I carried the stamped packet to the file cabinet and slid it into the tabbed folder that bears this case. The drawer closed with its small wooden breath. I turned off the lamp and walked through the quiet house. In the doorway I paused, listening for the last sound the day makes before it lets go. A neighbor's screen door clicked. Somewhere a rubber seal met paper under fluorescent bulbs while a clerk reached for the next case in the stack. That was enough. I went to bed with the thought that gravity had already started its pull, and all I had to do in the morning was stand where the floor would be. 3 knocks, a pause, then 3 more. Patterns tell on people. I stood in my hallway with the porch light throwing a pale rectangle across the floor. The doorbell camera chimed in my pocket with a quiet ping. I touched the screen and saw Dylan's face tilted up at the lens, cheeks flushed a sheen on his forehead that did not come from yard work. I left the chain latched and opened the door the width of 2 fingers. The night air smelled like hot dust and something sweet on his breath. His shirt was untucked. His eyes moved too fast. He leaned toward the gap and said he needed a word. He called me old man like it was a first name. I kept my hand on the knob and my voice even. This is not a good time. He put one palm on the frame and let it slide down as if testing varnish. He said families should keep lawyers out of private business. He told me to withdraw whatever I had set in motion. He said he heard about paperwork at the courthouse and he was giving me a chance to be smart. The camera above us blinked a small blue. He looked up at it and smirked like a boy caught by a teacher he believes he can talk past. I asked a plain question. Are you explaining a risk to me? He blinked. He said accidents happen when people do not leave situations alone. He let the last words sit there between us like a wet towel. I looked at his hand on the frame and then back to his face. I said, I hear you. He asked if I intended to keep pushing. I said I intend to keep records. He laughed without moving his mouth. He leaned closer, and a wave of alcohol floated through the crack. He said he had friends who could make money problems go quiet and that a man living alone ought to take care. He said take care as if it were two different words. I did not comment. I did not bite. I pointed at the chain and the camera by lifting my chin the smallest amount. He followed the motion and saw his own image in the tiny lens reflection. My neighbors were quiet. The street carried that late-hour hush where even a car 2 blocks away sounds like it is driving through your hallway. I said this door stays closed tonight. He said this is not over. I said it will be over when the record says it is. He told me to be careful and added a name he thought would sting. It did not. I closed the door the rest of the way until the chain pulled tight and the latch caught. His footsteps went down the concrete walk with a drag at the end of each step. I stood in the entry and let my pulse keep its own time. The camera app asked if I wanted to save the clip. I pressed yes. I sent the file to myself and to Ava with a short line, a visitor at my door. He implied harm might come. I included the timestamp. I did not add adjectives. The clip loaded and left my phone. I watched the progress bar finish and then I put the device face down on the table and listened to my own hallway breathe. A minute later, Ava called. Her voice did not rise. She said she had the clip and had already pushed it to a secure folder. She said she would add a note to our file and if needed ask for a restraining order on a short fuse. She asked if the door was locked. I said yes. She asked if I had somewhere else to sleep. I said I did not tonight. She said, then we will create somewhere. She told me to make a list of what I needed for 3 months and told me not to tell anyone where I would be. I wrote while she spoke. Clothes for a season, the case file, identification, a few tools and a small box of photographs. She recommended a gated complex near downtown where she knew the manager kept things simple and the keypads worked. Myriad Vista. She said she would call first thing and arrange a short lease. She asked me to send any future visitor clips immediately without engagement. I said I would. She said courage is choosing safety that keeps you effective. It sounded like advice she had used herself. After we hung up, I walked through the house once, slow and precise. I checked the windows and slider locks. I made a note to forward the mail. I put the stamped papers and the application copies in the center of the manila folder and counted the pages a second time. The habit calmed me. Numbers always have. I packed the bag before I slept. Shirts folded in a pattern I have used since I lived out of a rucksack. Socks rolled, not stuffed. The folder lay on top under a sweater so its corners would not catch. I set the bag by the door and left the porch light off for the first time in years. The house made its small night noises and I let them be what they are. Boards ease, ducks settle. I did not give them meaning beyond the physical. Morning arrived as if it had been told to be gentle. I brewed coffee and drank it standing at the sink. The clip from the door sat quietly in the sent folder with its time like a tag. The phone did not ring. At 9, Ava texted a single sentence. Lease approved. The manager will expect you at noon. She included a gate code and a unit number. I replied with a thank you that did not attempt to carry everything else I felt. I loaded the truck with measured motions. The bag, a second box for files, a small toolbox with a flat head and a level and things that make you feel less helpless in a new space. I took one last walk through each room, not to say goodbye, but to mark a memory. I had spent years learning to leave without fanfare. It still felt like work. Driving into Myriad Vista at midday felt like stepping out of the sun into a shade that belonged to other rules. The gate was a tall square of metal that moved slowly and surely along its track. I entered the code and the motor began its hum, a steady tone that cut off at the same pitch it started. I rolled forward and watched the gate close in the side mirror. behind it, the world took a step back. The manager in the office had a calm way of pushing papers across a counter. She did not pry. She photocopied my ID and handed me a set of keys with labels: unit, mail, laundry. She said the air runs cold and the neighbors mostly keep to themselves. She asked how long I would need. I said a couple of months, maybe 3. She nodded like I had said a normal thing. The unit was clean and spare, exactly what a person needs when safety outranks style. I set the bag on the bed and opened every blind. Light fell onto an empty table as if inviting a new stack of work. I placed the folder in the center and let my hand rest on it. The air conditioner clicked on with the quick confidence of a machine that has been serviced on schedule. A distant wash of traffic drifted through the closed window and softened into white noise. I texted Ava the unit number, not because she asked, but because it felt right for someone to know where I slept. She replied with a simple "got it," and then asked me to bring the clip to the meeting on a thumb drive in case the court wanted something hard to hold. I said I would. She told me the service was likely to land by week's end. She said when it does, do nothing but note the time and save any reaction you receive. The default lane requires silence from them, not statements from you. I walked the perimeter of the complex once to teach my eyes the lines. The fence glinted. The gate stood in its track with a confidence I envied. A woman walked a small dog and nodded. I nodded back. A delivery van idled briefly, then left. The routine of strangers in a place built for temporary peace made me feel like a part that fits into a machine without forcing. Back inside, I placed the camera doorbell from home on the table and wrote a note to myself to check the saved clips nightly from a distance. The device had already given me what I needed most: proof without argument. In a world that loves stories, sometimes the quiet weight of a time-stamped file does more than a page of adjectives. Near evening, I drove back to my house with the windows up and the radio off. I pulled to the curb without turning into the drive. I watched the front step for a full minute. Nothing moved. The porch light remained dark. I took a single envelope from my mailbox and left the rest for the forward to catch. Then I drove away without circling the block. The gate at Mesilla Vista opened to greet me with the same patient motor. The metal slid along and then closed with a soft finish that sounded like a decision. Inside the unit, the air was clean and cool. I placed the envelope on the counter and resisted the urge to open it standing up. I used a small knife and unfolded a notice about nothing urgent. I filed it in the new drawer I had already labeled with a strip of tape. The first night there, I slept like a person who had moved the chessboard out of reach and placed it under a light that never flickers. Courage felt less like a sword and more like a locked gate and a working air conditioner and a file that grows in all the right ways. In the early hours, a train sounded far off and then was gone. I woke once and checked the phone. No midnight texts, no missed calls. I put it face down again. Before dawn, I stood on the small balcony and looked at the city in a gray that makes edges honest. A truck murmured on the freeway and the breeze pressed a dry hand against my forearm. I thought about the knocks and the pause and the pattern they made. I thought about the camera chime and the way a clip can hold a moment until a judge can look at it without anyone telling him what to feel. Then I went inside and turned on the coffee and listened for the click when the air came on again. It did. The sound stitched the room together. I let it. I answered no calls and watched the sandias change color. Morning laid a pale band across the ridge. Then the pink came on softly, then the light went to clean white like a page ready for work. Steam rose from my cup and folded itself into the cool of the apartment. The gate at Mesilla Vista hummed open for a delivery van and settled shut again. I let the quiet stand between me and everything that wanted to be urgent. At 9, a soft knock at my unit door, not the front, but the office runner with an envelope from the county. Service completed, return attached, time and date stamped in blue. The seal was lifted just enough to feel with a thumb. The clip from my door sat in Ava's file already. Now the official clock had begun. I set the envelope on the table with the stamped copies from the week before and breathed once through my nose like a man who has carried weight and finally hands it to a scale. The courthouse portal showed our case at a glance. I refreshed the screen and the same line returned each time. No answer filed, no motion, just the docket number and the date that now belonged to us. I did not take a victory lap around the studio. I adjusted the chair and opened a new page for notes. Day 1 service confirmed, waiting period starts. At noon, the appraiser texted Colin and copied me. Arriving at the property this afternoon, Colin replied first. Lockbox instructions sent, proceed with full interior and exterior document systems and confirm square footage. He followed with a call to me. You will have a report within 48 hours, he said. Buyers like crisp data. Cashiers tuned to certainty. He did not ask about feelings. He spoke in the language of moving parts that fit. Red dots began to stack on my phone as the day went on. The first voicemail landed like a pebble in a calm bowl. Dad, call me. I do not understand these papers. I am scared. I logged the time and saved the file. The second came tighter. Clarence from Dylan's number, stop this circus. You cannot bully a family with documents. I typed the words exactly as they arrived and filed the audio after the first. The third arrived late afternoon. Nora again, softer. Please talk to me. We can fix this. I set the phone face down and watched the mountain go from white to gold to the long hush of late day. I kept my hands busy. A small list on a yellow page. Bring a thumb drive to Ava. Check the portal each morning, noon, and evening. Confirm appraisal appointment receipt. Review preliminary comps from Colin again tonight with fresh eyes. The routine let the air in my chest do what it needed to do without asking me for commentary. Toward evening, the email ping landed that I had been waiting for. Colin sent preliminary images that the appraiser had logged each frame with a date and a room. Surfaces are clean enough. The mechanical closet showing serial plates. Roofline from the curb with afternoon shadow pointing across the shingles. He added numbers in a short line. Condition average plus market steady cash interest likely to hold. He included 3 buyer initials, not names, and a sentence that carried the weight I needed. All 3 can close quickly. They want clarity more than a story. I sent him a simple answer. Keep them warm. No sign in the yard yet. We move in order. He replied with a single word. Understood. The next morning began the same way. Coffee portal breath. My finger tapped refresh and the screen told me the same truth. No filing from the other side. The timer moved another click without permission from anyone. Ava called from her desk before the courthouse opened. Silence does its own work, she said. If they maintain it past the deadline, default becomes a lane. We will ask the court to accept their absence as consent to proceed. Keep logging communication. Do not engage. The record is already speaking. Around midday, a text shivered across my screen from an unknown number. You will regret this, old man. I felt nothing new in the sentence. A threat is only smoke if the file has a window open. I forwarded the text to Ava and returned to the portal. Still no entry. I wrote another line in my notes. 2 days down, no reply window widening. Colin called from the curb outside the residence. Appraiser finished, he said, professional and thorough. Neighbors noticed, but no issues. I have a photographer on standby for MLS if we turn that key. 2 cash buyers want a first look before it goes public. I asked for their parameters. He said 30-day close at most, shorter if the title is clean and keys can be passed without noise. I said send them the appraisal when it lands. No promises until Ava clears me. He said Roger and hung up with the sound of a car door easing shut in the background. By late afternoon, the voicemails changed tone. Dylan again faster. You have no right. You are not part of this. Take your name off and walk away. He slurred one word and swallowed another. I saved the file and wrote only the time and the phrases used. Nora followed an hour later with a different kind of breath. We found an apartment wait list. We need time. Please pick up. I held the phone without pressing play. I respected pain, but I had promised myself the clock would speak louder than my pulse. I put the device back on the table and opened Colin's comps again. Numbers calm you when everything else asks for a messy reckoning. Evening fell and the sandias turned the color that makes strangers stop their cars to take pictures. I stood on the small balcony and let the world do its show. A plane began a slow path across the horizon like a silver sewing needle. The air conditioner clicked on and off in the unit behind me, a steady stitch. Any person could love if they have ever known true heat. I went back inside and wrote 2 more lines in straight hand. Appraisal and buyers circling no filings. Process remains impartial. That is its strength. The third day delivered appraisal report was delivered just after lunch. 40 pages of angles and measurements and market red. Photos stamped and labeled. Condition check marks in the boxes that matter. Collins summarized in a single line. Value supports our earlier band. Cash is still on deck. He asked if I wanted to preview a draft listing without publishing. I said send it to my email, hold it off the boards. He wrote done. And 5 minutes later I had a neat sheet with room dimensions, amenities, and a clean description that made no promises it could not keep. The words did not gush. They placed facts where buyers expect to see them. Ava's note arrived next. She had filed the appraiser's report with the court so the judge would have a picture that matched our narrative weight for weight. She wrote that hearing can be set fast if we need it. If they remain absent, we move directly to orders. She did not use the word victory. She used the word proceed. By late afternoon, my phone wore more red dots than I had seen in years. Messages stacked from both numbers. Some pleaded, some pressed, a few implied. I listened to 2 in full and transcribed a single line from each. Dad, we can talk if you stop this now. Old man, wait until the weekend and we will show you how wrong you are. I saved each clip and sent the bundle to Ava's secure folder with a subject line that said only communication log day 3. At dusk, I refreshed the portal one more time. The same quiet line waited there. Casey number filed date, no response on record. I closed the laptop and let the silence sit like a companion who does not need to fill it with words. The mountains went from rose to shadow. Streetlights blinked awake one by one. A baby cried in the unit below, and then went quiet as if someone had gotten the bottle to the right angle. 4th morning, same routine. Coffee steam and a pale strip on the ridge. The portal finally added a small note on the docket. Service returns accepted. Response due by a date circled now on my paper calendar. I drew a square around it so my hand would remember when my eyes forgot. I did not want them to miss their chance. I wanted their own choices to define the path so later I could sleep clean. Colin called with a half smile in his voice. I had not heard yet. First cash buyer wants to submit a letter of intent that mirrors the appraisal less a quick close discount. The second buyer wants to beat it by $5,000 but needs 1 extra week. The third buyer prefers privacy can match the highest and insists on quiet possession. I asked him to prepare non-binding letters and hold the commitment until Ava says. He agreed and sent over clean PDFs with signatures that meant interest, not yet a contract. The day stretched long and kind. I walked the fence line once and nodded at the guard in the small booth who checked plates without making anyone feel watched. Back inside, I sat with the folder and did nothing for 5 minutes on purpose. Revenge by silence is not revenge at all. It is restraint that lets the right tools do their job. The fairest voice is the clock. I wrote that line in the margin so I would not forget when someone tried to drag me back to a porch scene that never solves anything. Evening came and the Sandias let go of their last color. My phone face down, the red dots waited without winning. I kept logging. I kept abstaining from replies. I kept the portal open to the same line it had shown me all week. No answer, no pleading, no excuse, just time passing in a way that leaves a mark a judge can trust. When I finally turned off the lamp, the room held its shape without me. The clock on the stove changed by 1 minute. It was a small sound. It was also the sound of the only fair narrator I needed. Offers arrived like weather fronts, inevitable and indifferent. Colin laid them out in a clean email first, and then in print on a table that did not care what anyone felt about paper. 3 letters of intent, all cash. Each carried a number that lived in the same band the appraisal had drawn. One wanted speed, one wanted a whisper, one wanted a week. I chose the buyer who could close in 15 days without a single condition. The price sat a little under the appraised figure. Certainty has value. I sent Colin a sentence that fit on 1 line. Accept the fast close. He answered with 1 word and a time to meet the escrow officer. Ava called right after to place the next stones. Funds moved to escrow. Liens are clear in order. Costs and fees come off the top. Proceeds are divided by the percentages recorded. No speeches there. Only arithmetic that the bank already knows. I asked if she needed anything from me before we sat down with the escrow officer. She told me to bring identification and patience. She told me to remember that a neutral room pays the bill for us by being exactly what it is. 2 days later, we sat under fluorescent light at a long table that had seen couples sign, joy landlords sign evictions, and people like us sign what comes after silence. The escrow officer slid a stack to Ava. He slid another stack to me. He set a small dish of cheap pens between us like he did for everyone. He smiled without leaning in. He had the steady air of a man who knows where the wire instructions live, and where the notary keeps the stamp, and what to say if someone tries to turn a conference room into a confessional. Ava went first. She read with her finger resting on the left margin. She asked 2 questions that closed 2 small holes before anyone fell through them. The officer answered both with a page and a line number. She nodded and told me to sign where the flag stood. I signed each page as if it were a shift log. Same hand, same pace. No flourish. The notary's stamp pressed and lifted and left its raised circle that says, "A stranger checked your face and your name and agreed that they belong together." While we waited for the last lien payoff to confirm on the screen, I said one more thing to Ava. I want to add a quiet condition when the disbursement goes out. I do not want it to travel with my name. It should move through a third party. A small grant to cover relocation fees for Nora. It should unlock only if she attends a series of free financial counseling sessions at the credit union and signs a completion letter. No contact required. No contact desired. Just a door she can walk through that does not cost her anything but time. Ava did not blink. She asked for the number of sessions. She asked how we would verify without turning it into a circus. I said 6 sessions over 8 weeks letter on credit union letterhead funds released to the new landlord or mover directly not to her hand. She said that is mercy inside a boundary. I said that is the idea. She wrote 3 sentences that carried the whole plan without a single adjective. The officer read them and nodded and said, "We can instruct escrow to hold and disperse on those terms." He printed a fresh page and added it to the packet with a tab that said later. I signed the instruction and felt the small rightness of a thing that does not bend the process to make me feel noble, but still opens a way. Colin came in at the end with his folder and his calm. He took a photo of the keys on the table because buyers always want proof in pixels. He reviewed the wire coordinates with the officer in a low voice. He set aside a simple envelope with a copy of the wire confirmation for me. No fanfare. He said the sign will not go up. The writer who says sold will. That is what quiet buyers prefer. My phone buzzed twice in my pocket while we signed the last page. I let it live there unanswered. When we stood to leave, Ava touched my sleeve and said one sentence. Timelines control outcomes. Do not let outside noise tell you otherwise. She looked at the envelope in my hand and said, "Go home and eat something." Outside the glass doors of the title office, the parking lot felt like any parking lot. Heat rose off the blacktop and turned cars into soft shapes. I stood for a moment with the envelope that held the wire instruction and watched a palm frond make the same motion it makes in every city with wind. There is comfort in the repeatable. By late afternoon, Colin texted a photo. A small white rider with red letters slid onto a signpost in the yard. It did not trumpet. It whispered, "Sold." He wrote the keys to the buyer at closing. He wrote the possession date. He wrote, "Thank you for keeping it clean." I wrote back gratitude in a handful of words. He replied with a thumbs up and a time for the final walkthrough. That evening, Ava sent the breakdown by email. Line items to the cent. Principal balance. Interest to date. Unpaid bills are attached to the property. Fees to the courthouse and service. Agent commission. Legal fees. The line in bold at the bottom shows what remains to each side. No surprises. I sat at the table in the apartment and looked at the number like a mechanic checks a gauge after a fix. The needle sat where it should. She added one more line at the end. Your relocation condition is in place. Release only upon receipt of the counseling completion letter and proof of lease. Dispersing agent aware. I slept and woke and did not check my phone until coffee had settled into me. 3 messages were waiting. Dylan first, now smaller. "Stop this and we can make it right," he said. He offered to refinance on his own. He did not mention how. I saved the clip. I transcribed the one line that mattered. Make it right. Then I filed it. Nora next quieter. "We are packing," she said. "We found a place and we need deposits." She asked me to pick up the phone. I wrote the time in my log and put the device face down. The third message was a text with a screenshot of a job posting in a different city. Dylan added a line about fresh starts. I forwarded the image to Ava without comment. She replied, "Seen." On the morning of the walk-through, I met Colin at the curb. He had a small satchel that held everything a closing needs after the closing. He greeted me the way men who have worked around loud machines greet each other. Small nod, ready. He kept his voice low and steady as we went through the rooms. He pointed once to a wall scuff the photographer had missed and wiped it with a cloth he had brought. He said buyers love it when we remove small reasons to hesitate. I said thank you for teaching me something I did not know I needed to learn. The buyers arrived on time, a couple with the look of people who read everything twice and fix things that squeak. We shook hands. We did not trade back stories. Colin handed over the keys and took another photo with their consent to add to the file. They smiled without showing teeth and walked to their new rooms with quiet steps. The house did not know it had new people. Houses never do. They accept whoever carries the key. When the wire hit my account, the bank sent a message that did not celebrate. It acknowledged receipt and gave a tracking number. I went to the branch the next day to move a portion into a separate place with no card attached. The teller asked how my day was. I said orderly. She smiled because orderly is a word that makes her job easier. By the end of the week, the relocation instruction had moved through escrow toward the credit union desk. I called the counselor at the program to be sure the door was open for Nora without paperwork catching her ankle. The counselor said the sessions cover budgeting and debt triage and how to read a contract with your future in mind. She said we do not lecture, we walk. I said that I will do. I told her a deposit would sit in a holding account and would be released only if the attendance log filled the right boxes. She said she understood that kind of boundary. She said she would not say my name. That afternoon, Ava forwarded an email from Nora with the first appointment on the calendar. No contact with me, no message, just a forwarded confirmation from the counselor to the escrow agent. The note at the bottom said, "See you Tuesday." Ava added a single period in her reply to me. It was the neatest punctuation I have ever felt. Dylan tried one more angle before the possession date. He called and left a speech about forgiveness and starting over and family. He said we could stop the train and pull the papers and talk like adults. He used the word men twice. I let the message sit in the folder with the others. Ava had already told me the window for rescinding had closed. The court had accepted the uncontested lane. The schedule now belonged to signatures and locks and wires. I felt for him and did nothing that would change the physics of a done thing. The last time I stood on that sidewalk, the white rider on the post was still new. A neighbor waved from across the street. I waved back. The air smelled like warm stucco and cut grass. I did not grieve a sign. I respected the process. Mercy is not the opposite of justice. It is a boundary inside it, a quiet condition that says I will help you walk if you do not ask me to carry you. When I drove back through the gate at Mesilla Vista, the motor hummed and stopped the way it always does. Inside the unit, the air settled cool against my skin. On the table, the escrow envelope lay flat. I opened it and filed the final confirmations under a tab that would close this work when the last box was checked. I made a cup of coffee and stood at the window. The city moved in patterns it had learned long before I got here. The mountain went from white to gold. Somewhere a notary pressed a stamp onto someone else's day. Somewhere a pair of keys changed hands and a camera caught the moment. I did not need a picture. I had the figure in my ledger and a condition that might help my daughter step in a better direction. The rest could belong to the quiet. At sunrise, my coffee did not taste like revenge. It tasted like air. Steam rose and drifted along the window where the coarse grass held the first light. The kettle hiss faded, and the room settled into that clean quiet a new place gives you when it has no arguments stored in the walls. I stood barefoot on tile and watched the sandias lift a pale band of pink that widened until it found its tone. The papers had already settled what needed settling. Funds had landed. Locks had changed hands. The escrow envelope lay filed under a tab I would not touch again. I did not count anything. I let the silence do the counting for me. Later, I would walk the path that loops along the 9th fairway and memorize the curve where a ball always seems to find sand. For now, I set the mug down and unwrapped the frame that had waited in the back of a closet for years. The map was from my army days. Lines and grids and a faded legend along the bottom, names I have not spoken out loud in a long time. I hung it on the wall by the sliding door where the morning finds it without glare. The glass held the light and gave it back calmly. My hands remembered how to level by feel. 2 small nails. 1 breath. Done. The room looked like a man had lived here and was not visiting his own life anymore. The voicemail came while I worked with the picture wire. I let it finish before I pressed play. Nora's voice did not reach me. It reached for something steadier than me. Dad, I signed up for the sessions. The counselor sent a schedule. I know I have a lot to learn. Thank you for handling things the way you did. I am sorry it took the worst of it for me to hear what you were saying. I hope you are well. That was all. No promise of dinners, no story about change, just movement. I saved the message in a folder with a plain name. I did not call back. The condition lived at the credit union now with a list of empty boxes that would fill or not. The disbursement would be released only to a landlord or a mover if she walked in, sat down, listened hard, and came back again and again until habit replaced hope. It was a door set to open with work, not with sentiment. People always ask when something like this ends. It does not end with a stamp or a wire. It ends with the slow work of staying steady. Months ago, while Ava was building the checklist that carried us through, I asked her to draft one more thing with my name quietly inside it. A modest trust that would not show itself. Money that sits and waits under rules that do not bend because someone has a loud day. Release only if the person it is meant to help stays out of consumer traps, completes the counseling, and lives a full year paying bills on time without borrowing against tomorrow. Ava holds it. Not me. If Nora meets the marks, a letter will go to whoever needs to receive it. If she does not, the letter will sit in a drawer and keep its ink to itself. I never told her. It is meant to guard her from a kind of danger I cannot talk away. I slid the empty frame paper into the trash and wiped the glass with a cloth. Outside, a groundskeeper in a small cart eased along the rough and lifted a hand without stopping. I lifted mine back. The light threw a long shape of my shoulder across the stucco and dragged it toward the floor. I watched it shrink as the sun climbed and felt my chest loosen the last of what it had been holding. Not joy, not triumph, just space. The front door latch made that small sound I love, the one you get when a hinge is oiled and a deadbolt fits its strike without argument. I stepped out and let the cool air sit on my face. A bird hopped along the railing and took off when it had seen what it came to see. Somewhere down in the lot, a trunk closed and a voice said, "See you later," in a tone that did not require an audience. The world had its own timing and it did not need me to push it. I put on a jacket and walked to the path. The grass carried dew in a thin sheet and the brown earth at the edges held tracks from yesterday's carts. The mountain line to the east looked like a simple drawing cut from paper and placed against the sky. A jogger passed and nodded. I nodded back. The kind of nod that says we are both trying to keep something quiet alive. By the water hazard, a heron stood with one leg tucked patient as a clock that does not own a second hand. I stopped and looked down into water that held a broken picture of the clouds. I thought about the porch and the folder and the way a man can lose his voice in rooms that reward volume. I thought about forms that lodge and seals that press, and the way a case number can do a kind of work a human voice cannot. Peace is the sound paperwork makes when it is done. It is not loud. It is a drawer closing. It is a stamp lifting. It is a key to meeting the right lock. Back at the condo, I boiled water again just to hear the kettle sing. I stood with the map and read a couple of names I had not said since I put on a different uniform and carried a different kind of weight. I let the memories pass like weather that knows the ground is no longer its problem. It left a clean smell. Nothing else. Ava texted a note for the file. Counseling confirmed. Session 1 complete. No need to reply. I put the phone down and did not reply. She does not need thanks to do her job. She needs clean documents and a client who does not drag her work back into sentiment. I set a calendar reminder for nothing in particular. Habit more than need. 12 months is a long time and also not long at all. A year is 12 lines filled in order. We will see. I pulled a small box from the closet and took out a pair of old photographs. Not to make myself feel better. To make sure I remembered that people can be several things in one lifetime. Nora with a gap in her teeth standing on a chair to reach a mixing bowl. I was with a tired grin after a double shift holding a paper crown she made from a grocery sack. I put the photos back. I did not frame them. This room needed the map more than it needed proof of a younger face. The afternoon took on that high quiet that comes when the day realizes it will keep its promise. I read a page of a book and then set it down. I replaced the air filter in the return because good air matters more than most people think. I walked out again at dusk and watched the course lights come on one by one as if someone off-site threw a switch in a neat sequence. The sandias let go of their color and returned to their outline. I breathed in and did not feel the urge to call anyone. The file would grow or it would not. The trust would release or it would sit. My job was to walk and sleep and pay my bills and keep my voice ready for the day Nora might want to hear it without trying to win anything. Before bed, I listened to the voicemail again. Not for comfort, for the record. Her voice was steady. That mattered more than the words. I saved it a second time in a cloud folder with a silly name that would not mean anything to anyone who opened it by mistake. Then I turned the phone face down and set it to Do Not Disturb. The room took that in and returned a softer sound I had not heard in a long time. It sounded like rest. When I woke in the dark just before morning, I did not reach for the clock. I listened for the kettle hiss in my head and felt the shape of the map on the wall even without light. I waited until the fieldmen drove the first cart, and then I got up and made coffee and opened the door. The air was cold enough to be honest. I stepped out and let the steam warm my face. The mountains held their line. The day began. I had no enemies to inventory, just a list with 2 items. Keep steady, stay ready for light. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the playlist now showing on screen.